Man is the only creature who refuses to be what he is. That's Albert Camus for those of you who don't know. Hello, welcome back. My name is Caleb Johnston, and today we are going to be discussing the faux scene of Western politics, a fatal flaw you might have missed. I know that's a bit vague, but you'll see what I'm getting at in just a moment. Quick disclaimer, there's been about a week past since I came up with this concept. I was at work, didn't write it down, but I had recently been pondering paganism. There's a nice YouTube channel out there titled The Ark, and he has some great videos, especially on the modern political sphere and the ideologies that underline it. And I started thinking about the metaphysics of what he was talking about. And that's where I came up with the topic I'm going to discuss today. So to get into it, let's start with a quote from Margaret de Sluaz and Zoli Philotas. Forgive the pronunciation, that was miserable. And it's on a paper they wrote called Aristotle's Human Beings. And it quotes, "For Aristotle, human beings are characterized by a range of rational activities, notably theoretical reflection, practical deliberation, and the training and refinement of emotion and appetite." Excuse me. The rational side makes man separate from the fully bestial side. Animals have this rational side to lesser degrees, but not as much. That was a note that I added in. Humans tend to have really a 50-50. They include both natures for their own reasons, for their own purposes. And this is the point that's being made, is that human beings are distinguished from other animals by this rational side that is almost pretty much equally important to the bestial side when you look at the purposes that they both serve. So, where does this tie into politics? Well, there is a fundamental metaphysical battle in politics between progressivist camps and traditionalist camps. The both sides have solid concepts individually on when it comes to the emphasis on certain parts of human nature. For instance, the progressive camps centrally hold progress, for this case the more rational side of humanity, what requires thinking to develop outside of the animalistic nature, the thing that separates humans from animals, so that's how you kind of put them in the same camp, as a value stemming from the human will and then therefore inherently natural or good. So basically progress is something that comes out of the human will, you can see it manifesting in history, therefore it is part of man's nature and good, etc. Pretty simple argument. Now, but traditionalist camps generally hold tradition, generally centrally hold tradition and human nature in the bestial side of it, so not the side that requires thought to break outside of the animal sphere, as being something to protect first and foremost apart from anything artificial, seeing progress with a more skeptical eye as a potential vice. So they don't see progress as necessarily being and evil, but they see progress as a lot more skeptical in theory. So something that we have to be cautious of because that progress can turn back and basically bite itself in the tail, which that's very true, especially when you see the examples below. But the solid concepts that they both advocate are in practice ultimately quite corrupted most of the time. Progressive camps in their most extreme forms condemn the bestial side, basically by consequence, by introducing and overusing artificial foods, anti-reproductive policies such as abortion and contraception, and pulling away from ancient virtues such as sexual vitality, masculine and feminine beauty, and ritualistic lifestyles that were culturally pretty much universal in past times up until the modern era. Traditionalist camps, in most extreme forms, of course, as mentioned before, condemn rational aspects of the human mind in progress by eyeing scientific progress, such as the theory of evolution, with overzealous skepticism. That's just one example of progress out of the progress that I was mentioning before. Then blurring the line between spiritual and material due to the lack of skepticism, and finishing it off by implementing a rejection of most technology that would allow them to even discover whether they were wrong or not. Truth be told, I'm not saying that these corrupt errors do not see truth. So I'm not saying that they are not pointing out an issue, and I think a lot of them actually are pointing out a genuine issue with the other side and what it emphasizes. However, the truth perceived by them tends to be for the wrong reasons. They're perceiving the truth but with the wrong method. It's kind of accidental, not incidental. And this issue, furthermore, is not necessarily theoretical, but more practical. In theory, they are not implying these issues, these mistakes that they're making. These are in practice when the theory manifests itself. So a middle ground is needed to affirm both sides of human nature, the rational and the bestial, because they're both part of human nature. If you miss one, then the other cannot fully function because they're simply part of the existence. They're part of the will, part of the human species. I mean, it's just part of what they are, how they are designed. So when these corruptions appear, it is because you're stifling one or the other. That's why a middle ground is needed, a way to unify the two. They're meshing, not consuming one another. So why is this middle ground not found? Why is it not there if it's so important? This is because both sides fall into the fallacy of guilt by association, that's how it's known informally, or genetic fallacy. That's the formal name for it. They associate the other side of human nature as detestable without even intending to, or certain aspects. I know that's a bit too general. I'm using Wikipedia here. I know it's a weird source, but you can look this up, I promise. The genetic fallacy, also known as the fallacy of origins or fallacy of virtue, is a fallacy of irrelevance in which arguments or information are dismissed or validated based solely on their source of origin rather than their content. In other words, a claim is ignored or given credibility based on its source rather than the claim itself. Now, of course, a source having experience in a certain matter can make it more valid, or a source being well known for being dishonest in a certain area can give it a certain level of necessary ignorance that should be put towards it, but you should take it with a grain of salt, not dismiss it, which is where the fallacy comes into play. With this happening, of course, people then necessarily take a thing such as progress, they see it advocated by progressivism, and they say, oh, well, therefore all progress tends to be evil. So as I said with the traditionalist camps that will tend to do things such as pick a time in history where technology was pure, or it was progress that was still good, and it usually tends to be when their particular camp was flourishing, which is the same with progressivism, they do it in their own way, and then they say, well, that was when it was good and then it declined. And they tend to just take progress and cap it at a certain point, put it in a certain point of history, put a static variable on a dynamic reality. And what happens then? Well, there are a lot of questions that are raised when we find that this middle ground does not exist. If progress is natural, then why does it sometimes seem unnatural in the case of the progressive overreaches of progression? And if the bestial side is so good, then why is the rational side needed, and to what extent? How far can we use our rational faculties to progress beyond that bestial nature without crushing it? Because we do have to remember that it is most reasonable to only really accept something that does not destroy the thing it is trying to protect. So progress should only validate human nature, or at least not interfere with it, because if, as I said before, they are both part of the human nature, at least according to Aristotle and according to most people who understand the definition of a human being. So if you have something that uses one of its sides to eliminate the other one, it is no longer the thing it is. So a thing cannot continue to exist if it is no longer the thing that it was when it began to progress. That is not progression, that is self-destruction, so to speak. I know I had a better idea in mind, but I'm going off of notes and I totally forgot it in the moment. But with that being said, we really do have to hold a middle ground. It is extremely difficult. It's one of those things like the golden mean that Aristotle talks about. You genuinely do have to continually pull yourself from one or the other. We all make this mistake, believe me, I do it all the time. But with that being said, I'm not going to keep on going and distract you guys because, as I said, this concept is a question that I cannot even answer. I just wanted to bring it to the question, present it to you guys, and hopefully this is something that people can study in the future. And even recently, it's been being brought up in a lot of debates. As I said, I'd say go check out the Ark's channel. He's got some amazing content on it. And really, it's a fundamental metaphysical concept that needs to be reconciled before we really can make any more actual progress for both traditionalists and progressivists. So anyway, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.